There was a time when Dwayne "Dog" Chapman seemed absolutely invincible, a force of nature who could hunt down anyone, anywhere, and still flash that signature grin from behind his shades. But the truth behind that tough guy mask was a universe away from the fearless hero the world adored. His life became a devastating spiral of crushing losses, gut-wrenching betrayals, and impossible choices that even he couldn't outrun. From the absolute chaos of his childhood to the kind of soul-shattering heartbreak that nearly destroyed him, every single scar told a story of sheer survival, but it was also a story steeped in pain. This is the making of the legendary Dog the Bounty Hunter. Dwayne Chapman was born on February 2, 1953, in Denver, Colorado, to a Navy welder father and a devout Sunday school teacher mother. But his early years were a nightmare, a far cry from the loving, family image he would one day project to the world. His father, Wesley, a man known for his heavy hands and boxing skills, was a ticking time bomb with a violent temper who believed discipline was hammered in through pure pain. He would frequently beat young Dwayne with a solid wooden paddle, leaving a constellation of bruises the little boy desperately tried to conceal. All the while, his mother, Barbara, could only pray for a moment of peace, but her prayers were powerless against the storm of abuse. Chapman would later confess the heartbreaking truth that he thought such punishment was completely normal. It wasn't until he was a grown man that he could finally see how deeply that violence had fractured his spirit. At just 16, having reached his absolute breaking point, Dwayne bolted from home, trading one hell for another by joining a notorious motorcycle gang, the Devil's Disciples, and diving headfirst into a world of drugs, raw violence, and pure chaos. He swapped Sunday sermons for street survival, and ironically, it was in the middle of a brutal bar fight, defending his faith, that his legendary nickname was forged in fire. A fellow biker snarled at him, "You fight like a dog. That's God spelled backward." And from that exact moment, he didn't just accept the name Dog, he embraced it. He transformed it into his very identity, his armor against the world, and ultimately, his destiny. In 1972, a young Dwayne met his first wife, LaFonda Sue Darnell. They tied the knot that very same year and tried to build a normal life in Pampa, Texas, bringing two sons into the world, Dwayne Lee II and Leland. But any hope for peace was a fleeting dream. By 1976, his entire world was about to take a terrifyingly dark turn. He found himself caught in the crossfire of a drug deal that went horribly, tragically wrong. As he sat waiting in a car, one of his so-called friends shot and killed a man named Jerry Oliver in cold blood. Now, Dwayne never even touched the weapon. But in the eyes of Texas law, it didn't matter one bit. He was charged as an accomplice to a brutal murder. And just like that, he was sentenced to 5 long years in a Texas state prison. He would end up serving 18 months behind bars, 18 months that would completely shatter and then remake the man he was. On the inside, Dwayne kept his head down, working as a barber for the guards. But then, in a moment of sheer chaos, he saved a fellow inmate's life during a desperate escape attempt, physically stopping other guards from opening fire. That single act of bravery completely changed the way everyone saw him, right up to the warden himself. One of the officers looked him dead in the eye and told him he had the raw instincts of a bounty hunter, a natural-born predator who could hunt down criminals without having to take a life. It was a strange, almost prophetic statement, but it burned itself into his mind as he finally walked free from those prison gates in 1978. He was a completely different man. He'd lost his freedom, his marriage had crumbled, he'd nearly lost his faith, but in the ashes of his old life, he found something new. A powerful, undeniable purpose. And that purpose drove him headfirst into the adrenaline-fueled world of bounty hunting. He started hunting down fugitives, chasing them across the rugged landscapes of Colorado and the tropical paradise of Hawaii. Fueled by those razor-sharp instincts he'd sharpened on the mean streets and in the brutal prison yards. But bounty hunting was never just a job for Dog. It became his redemption. It was his one chance to give others the same second chance he was so sure God had given him. The answer to what happened to Dog the Bounty Hunter begins right here. But the path to redemption is paved with love, loss, and a staggering price. Freedom didn't bring him peace, it brought a whole new world of temptation. When Dwayne "Dog" Chapman walked out of that prison in the late 1970s, he was carrying far more scars than cash, locked in a brutal war between crushing guilt and the raw need to survive. A battle that in many ways defines Dog Chapman today. After the ink was barely dry on his divorce from LaFonda, his world collided with a 17-year-old Ann Tegnell at a wild biker party in 1977. To sidestep a mountain of legal trouble, He did the unthinkable, he married her the very next day. But their whirlwind romance was a house of cards, collapsing under the crushing weight of addiction and soul-crushing poverty. They brought 3 sons into this chaos: Zebedee, who was tragically lost just moments after birth, then Wesley, and James Robert. But by 1982, the dream was shattered. Anne had finally had enough, taking the kids and leaving him in the dust. In that very same year, a heartbroken Dwayne "Dog" Chapman walked into a Colorado bar and met Lisa Ray Britton. Their path to the altar wasn't born from love, but from a jaw-droppingly impulsive deal. He literally offered her a pile of cash to have his baby, a shocking arrangement that resulted in 3 more children: Barbara, Tucker, and Lisa. But the relentless, adrenaline-fueled chaos of his bounty-hunting life was a brutal mismatch for her quiet spirit. And by 1991, another marriage had turned to ashes. Yet, even as his personal life was a wreck, Dog the Bounty Hunter's career was absolutely exploding. He became a legend, feared by fugitives from the shores of Hawaii to the mountains of Colorado. He wasn't just chasing bad guys, he was a man desperately chasing his own redemption. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he always said, a mantra that would echo through his entire life. Then, in 1988, destiny itself stepped in, introducing him to the one and only Beth Smith. This was the fiery, unforgettable woman he'd once bailed out of a jail cell. She was a force of nature, bold, impossibly stubborn, and the woman who would become the absolute love of his life, the incredible Beth Chapman. By the late 1990s, they'd packed up and planted their flag in Hawaii. They launched their now famous Dakeen bail bonds and merged their 2 chaotic families into one. Side by side, they hunted down the most dangerous fugitives and forged an empire, completely clueless that their fame and their love were on a collision course with unimaginable loss, blinding fame, and a scandal so huge it would threaten to burn his entire world to the ground. By the early 2000s, Dwayne "Dog" Chapman was already a god in the bounty-hunting underworld, but the rest of the world had no idea who he was. That all changed in 2003, with the high-profile capture of the fugitive Andrew Luster. This wasn't just any criminal, he was the heir to the massive Max Factor fortune, and Dog nabbed him in Mexico. The arrest became a global media firestorm, but there was one huge problem: bounty hunting is illegal there, and suddenly Dog, Beth, and their son Leland were the ones in cuffs, thrown in a Mexican jail and accused of kidnapping. After terrifying nights behind bars, they were finally released on bail, with the charges eventually, miraculously, being dropped. But that harrowing ordeal flipped the script. The hunter became the hunted, and it catapulted him to overnight stardom. The world was hooked, and in 2004, Dog the Bounty Hunter exploded onto A&E. It was an instant sensation, turning their chaotic lives into television gold. America couldn't get enough of the raw adrenaline, the deep emotion, Dog's unwavering faith, Beth's incredible strength, and their undeniable, explosive chemistry. But what viewers didn't see was the heartbreaking reality that behind the cameras, the family was starting to crack under the pressure. His own sons, Dwayne, Lee II and Leland, were locked in a bitter war with Beth over money and power, a conflict that got so bad they ultimately walked away from the show entirely. Dog was caught in the middle, desperately trying to hold his family together. But the tension was a poison seeping into their new reality. And then, in 2007, a single, leaked phone call would detonate a bomb in the middle of his life. The world was shocked to hear Dog using a deeply offensive racial slur during a private conversation about his son Tucker's girlfriend. The public backlash was immediate and absolutely brutal. A&E yanked the show off the air, sponsors ran for the hills, and the reputation he'd built was left in smoldering ruins. A broken dog appeared on CNN, issuing a desperate public apology, begging for forgiveness from the world. After months of agonizing silence, A&E cautiously brought him back, but the damage was done. He was never the same. The fame that had once been his greatest victory now felt like a soul-crushing curse. By the time Dog the Bounty Hunter ended in 2012, the fearless warrior who once chased fugitives across Hawaii was a different man. He looked tired, broken, and utterly lost. He was a hero brought to his knees by the very spotlight that created him, the incredible love that saved him, and the devastating loss that would ultimately break him. By 2017, Dog and Beth Chapman had transcended reality TV. They were an American institution, a symbol of unbreakable strength and ride-or-die devotion. But that was the year their entire world came crashing down. The devastating news hit like a freight train. Beth was diagnosed with stage 2 throat cancer. The legendary bounty hunter was absolutely crushed, suddenly powerless to save the one woman who had been his rock through every single battle. Their gut-wrenching fight for her life was laid bare for the world to see in the special Dog and Beth fight of their lives, revealing a man completely stripped of his tough guy armor. Fans saw a side of him they'd never seen before, a man utterly terrified of losing his soulmate. And for one beautiful, fleeting moment, it seemed like a miracle had happened. Beth was declared cancer-free at the end of 2017, but the joy was tragically short-lived. By late 2018, the monster was back, this time spreading with a vengeance to her lungs. Even then, the incredible Beth Chapman refused to surrender. She insisted on filming Dogs Most Wanted, pushing through unimaginable pain. A warrior to the very end, absolutely determined to live out her final days on her own damn terms. On the devastating day of June 26, 2019, at the tragically young age of 51, the incredible Beth Chapman passed away in Honolulu, with Dog holding her hand to the very end. "Let me go," were her final, haunting whispers, words that would echo in his soul for all the agonizing months that followed. The legendary Dog the Bounty Hunter was completely shattered, spiraling into a black hole of grief, and admitting he even thought about ending it all, confessing, "I didn't want to live." As if the heartbreak wasn't enough, crushing financial problems piled on, and then doctors discovered a terrifying blood clot in his lungs that nearly took his life. It took a dramatic intervention from Dr. Oz to get him to quit smoking and start therapy, but absolutely nothing could fill the gaping void that Beth Chapman left behind. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the man who hunted fugitives across the entire globe found himself utterly and completely alone. He was no longer running from criminals, but from a tidal wave of heartbreak, a crisis of faith, and a storm that seemed to have no end. After Beth's death, Dwayne Dog Chapman fought with everything he had to keep his promise to her to keep on living, to keep up the fight. But the man who once seemed absolutely unbreakable was now drowning in an ocean of grief, barely leaving his Colorado home for months on end. Fans saw shocking glimpses of him online. He was thinner, weaker, and so visibly lost. Then, the whispers started. Rumors that Dog had found comfort in the arms of someone new. Her name was Moon Angel, a longtime family friend, and, incredibly, Beth's own former assistant. When photos of them together exploded online in early 2020, the internet went wild. The backlash was immediate and absolutely brutal. Dog's own daughter, Lissa, launched a public attack, accusing Moon of being a homewrecker. Dog frantically defended her, claiming she was just a friend helping him survive his darkest days. But the drama took another shocking turn in February of that year. During a raw, emotional appearance on the Dr. Oz show, Dog stunned the world by suddenly proposing to Moon on live television. She flat-out refused, insisting they were only friends. Dog later tried to claim it was all just a test, that he just wanted to see how the world would react. Well, the world, as you might expect, was not kind. But then, away from the cameras and the chaos, something real and quiet began. That same year, Dog's life intersected with Francie Frayne. She was a Colorado rancher who understood his pain on a level no one else could, having also tragically lost her spouse to cancer. Their story began with a fateful phone call. Dog had actually called Francie's late husband's number, hoping to hire him for some landscaping. Francie answered, and what started as a simple business inquiry instantly became a soul-bearing conversation about loss, faith, and survival. They were two broken people searching for a reason to go on. Within mere months, that shared river of grief flowed into an undeniable love. By May of 2020, Dog proposed, declaring that God himself had brought them together. While many fans criticized him for moving on too fast, Dog insisted his beloved Beth would have wanted him to find peace and happiness again. "Francie knows my pain because she's lived it," he explained. "When we talk about our late spouses, we heal a little each time." In September of 2021, the two finally found their new beginning, marrying in a private, intimate ceremony in Colorado, surrounded by their closest family. Together, Dog and Francie began the monumental task of rebuilding not just their lives, but their very purpose. In 2023, they moved to Marco Island, Florida, before settling down in Georgia, where they founded the Dog Foundation, a crucial part of the story of Dog Chapman today. It's a powerful nonprofit that offers housing, counseling, and critical life skills training to the survivors of the horrors of human trafficking. Dog began speaking at Christian events across the country and writing a new book, 9 Lives and Counting, which he calls his powerful testimony of faith. He told the news press in 2023, "God took my pain and turned it into purpose, but as anyone asking what happened to Dog the Bounty Hunter knows, peace never lasts long in his world." On July 19, 2025, the unthinkable happened. Tragedy struck the Chapman family once again. His stepson, Gregory Zika, Francie's son from a previous marriage, was allegedly involved in a horrific accident that took the life of his own 13-year-old son, Anthony, in Naples, Florida. The news absolutely shattered the Chapman family. Dog and Francie could only release a joint statement, calling it a completely incomprehensible and tragic accident. Dog was left utterly speechless, telling friends he had nothing left but prayers. This was a man who had looked death in the eye in every conceivable way on the mean streets, behind cold prison bars, even in his own home. But this was a blow that was almost too much to bear. As he tried to comfort Francie, Dwayne Dog Chapman was being haunted by the ghosts of his own past. His own daughter, Barbara, was tragically killed in a car crash way back in 2006, on the very eve of his wedding to the love of his life, Beth Chapman. And now, history was repeating itself with another young life cruelly snatched away. We are a family that knows tragedy far too well. Dog confessed to a pastor in Georgia, but we still have to believe in grace. Through it all, Dog somehow keeps pushing forward. He's transformed his home into a sanctuary, a place of constant prayer and quiet reflection, surrounded by cherished photos of Beth Chapman and their children. His faith, which was once hanging by a thread, has now become his unbreakable armor. "I'm not just a bounty hunter anymore," he declared in 2025. "I'm a Christian outlaw, chasing souls instead of fugitives." Now, at 72 years old, Dog the bounty hunter might have slowed his step, but that ferocious fire that once made him feared across the nation still burns deep inside. Only now, it's a flame tempered by unimaginable faith and devastating loss, the complicated legacy of a broken hero. By 2025, the story of what happened to Dog the bounty hunter shows he had lived more lives than most men could ever dream of. A renegade outlaw, a devoted husband, a father, a massive celebrity, and now, a survivor against all odds. But the crushing weight of those lives pressed down on him, a burden carried through his own children, whose tumultuous paths have so often mirrored his own brand of chaos. Behind the blinding spotlight, the Chapman family has been forced to endure crushing heartbreak, the demons of addiction, and a level of tragedy that few could ever truly comprehend. Dog has a staggering 13 biological and adopted children, and every single one carries a piece of his turbulent legacy. His oldest son, Christopher Hecht, was thrown into a years-long battle with mental illness and endless legal troubles after being adopted following the devastating suicide of his mother. Others, like Dwayne Lee II and Leland, tried to follow in their father's legendary footsteps, but they walked away from bounty hunting after bitter family feuds and explosive financial disputes. "Children grow up," the unforgettable Beth Chapman once wisely said. "At some point they have to fly, and we just have to let them." But for Dog, letting go was never, ever easy. Back in 2006, Dog was forced to face the absolutely unbearable when his daughter, Barbara Katie, was tragically killed in a horrific car crash in Alaska at the tender age of just 23, on the very night before he was set to marry Beth. He was on the verge of calling the whole thing off, but his family rallied around him, convincing him to go on, insisting that Barbara would have wanted it that way. But her loss carved a wound so deep it would never truly heal. Years later, when his step-grandson, Anthony, was accidentally shot in 2025, it ripped that old wound wide open all over again. God gives, and God takes away. Dog Chapman today says, his voice barely a whisper in a recent interview, but sometimes he takes too much, and even his younger children are forced to carry the heavy burden of his fame. Bonnie and Cecily, Beth's beloved daughters, have had to publicly wrestle with their grief and their own identities, and at times, they've clashed explosively with Dog over his new marriage and his evolving beliefs. Meanwhile, his son Tucker simply vanished from public life, choosing total anonymity over the glaring spotlight that once defined their entire family. But Lissa Ray, on the other hand, channeled her pain into a powerful purpose, launching her own boutique and finally marrying her longtime love, Leanna Evenson, in a beautiful 2022 ceremony. And even though Dwayne Dog Chapman couldn't be there in person, he FaceTimed her through a flood of tears, calling it one of the absolute proudest moments of my life. But not every chapter in this family's saga has a hopeful ending. In October of 2025, his youngest son, Gary Chapman, a 24-year-old police officer in Alabama, was caught in the blinding glare of national headlines after a high-speed chase spiraled out of control, leading to the tragic death of a 17-year-old boy named Tristan Hollis. In the aftermath, Gary was fired from the Priceville Police Department, accused of violating critical pursuit protocols. But he was shockingly brought back after the city council, with the legendary dog himself making a powerful plea in his defense, voted unanimously to give him that one last shot at redemption. But the drama didn't end there. Gary clapped back with a jaw-dropping $10 million lawsuit for wrongful termination. Facing a sea of reporters, Dog's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm known as the second chance guy, and I thank this committee for giving my son one too." You could feel the raw mix of pride and heartbreak in every single word, a painful echo of his own past. A chilling recognition that his son's fight for redemption was the very same war he had fought decades before. Through all this chaos, Dwayne "Dog" Chapman has been a walking contradiction, part lion, part lamb, a man forever torn between delivering justice and offering forgiveness. He once confessed, "I used to hunt fugitives. Now I hunt for peace." But for a man like Dog, peace is a fugitive that's just too damn hard to catch. Even his quest to rebuild his faith has been a minefield of controversy. In 2024, he found himself in the eye of a hurricane of backlash for some explosive comments made at a Christian rally where his fiery words aimed at a transgender activist threw gasoline on the fire, reigniting the explosive debate about his famously short fuse and his public image. Dog swore he was speaking from conviction, not hate, but the stain on his reputation was hard to wash away. And yet, for all his demons, the man remains an absolute magnet for people wherever he goes. At church gatherings, he's a preacher of second chances. On social media, he's a shoulder to cry on, praying with fans who are grieving, just like he did for his beloved Beth Chapman. And at home in Georgia, surrounded by his loyal dogs, his new love Francie, and the ghosts of those he's lost, it seems Dog Chapman today might finally be finding some quiet in his soul. Or maybe he's just learning to live with the storm inside. He once made a chilling admission. Every single fugitive he ever brought in was like looking in a mirror. They were lost, they were running, but he believed, deep down, they could still be saved. Now, in the twilight of his absolutely wild life, that single idea defines him more than anything. "I don't know if I'll ever stop chasing," he confessed recently, his voice heavy with the weight of years. "I just hope when my time comes, I'll finally catch what I've been looking for." Dwayne "Dog" Chapman's story was never a fairy tale. It's a brutal, gut-wrenching saga of survival, a journey from outlaw to absolute icon, from a devoted husband to a heartbroken widower, from a sinner on the run to a believer seeking grace. He has lived a life that screams one undeniable truth: redemption is never, ever easy. But after all the heartbreak, all the blinding fame, and all the crushing loss, we have to ask, what happened to Dog, the bounty hunter, and can a man like him, Dog the bounty hunter, ever truly find peace? If this incredible story hit you right in the feels, do us a huge favor and smash that like button. Share this with anyone who remembers watching this legend on TV, and make sure you subscribe for more unbelievable true stories behind the faces you only thought you knew.